Hi, it's Dr. Phoenix. Today we're going to be looking at active transport as we continue to look at ways in which cells move substances across their cell membrane. If you recall from yesterday, we looked at passive transport. And passive transport, we saw that molecules move down the concentration gradient. In other words, from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. And it does not require any effort or any energy on the part of the cell for this to happen. The energy is provided by the kinetic energy of the molecules themselves. Today we're going to be looking at what's known as active transport. And this is where molecules are going to be moving in completely the opposite direction. Molecules are now going to be moving up the concentration gradient, or from low to high concentration. Now, moving molecules up the gradient is going to require energy now on the part of the cell. So just to review, the two types of transport mechanisms that allow molecules to move across the cell membrane are passive transport and active transport. Examples of passive transport were diffusion and osmosis, and this is where small particles can move directly across the cell membrane, and this has to do with their ability to get through the phospholipid membrane. It may be because the molecules are lipid soluble, or they're just very, very tiny and get in between the phospholipid molecules. Then if the molecules are a little bit too big, there are either pores or carrier molecules that happen to be proteins built into the membrane. These molecules, however, are still moving downhill. They're just being assisted by these proteins that are in the cell membrane, and this is called facilitated diffusion. Again, today we're going to be looking at active transport. We're going to see that there are protein molecules within the membrane that allow this to happen, but the molecules are moving down the gradient with the requirement of energy on the cell. All right, so what are the types of active transport that we're going to be looking at today? Active transport can be in the form of cell membrane pumps. These are actual protein molecules within the phospholipid bilayer that actually will pump molecules in a certain direction, as we'll see. And then what's known as bulk transport. So let's look at cell membrane pumps first. Cell membrane pumps are literally molecules within the cell membrane that act as pumps, and as such they can move certain molecules across the membrane, either into or out of the cell. And they have the ability to actually move molecules against the concentration gradient. They require energy. That's this little phosphate here is a phosphate coming off of ATP that provides the energy for these pumps to work. One of the things that you'll see with active transport is that with active transport, equilibrium is not the end result. Molecules can be completely pumped from one side of the membrane to the other, leaving almost none on one side and a great concentration on the other. So what is the purpose of these cell membrane pumps? Why are they necessary? Why do we want to set up these concentration gradients rather than have equilibrium? Well, our nerve and muscle cells are particularly interested in these cell membrane pumps, and the most popular, the most famous cell membrane pump is called the sodium-potassium pump. Nerve and muscle cells, if you look at this picture on the top right here, have an excess of positive charges on the outside of their membrane and an excess of negative charges on the inside. The reason for that is because these sodium-potassium pumps will pump an excess of sodium ions to the outside, and we know that sodium are positive, and they'll pump potassium ions to the inside. So for every 3 sodium ions that get pumped out, 2 potassium get pumped in. So there's going to be an excess of positive charges on the outside of nerve cells and muscle cells. This is referred to as polarized. And without getting into any more detail than that, this is necessary in order for nerves to conduct impulses and for muscles to contract. The second type of active transport is referred to as bulk transport. And this is moving large particles or large amounts of substances across the cell membrane, either into the cell or out of the cell. And the two types of bulk transport are endocytosis and exocytosis. Endocytosis is the process in which we bring in large molecules or large particles or fluid with particles. The word endo literally means in or into, so we're bringing things into the cell. There are 2 types of endocytosis, pinocytosis and phagocytosis. Pinocytosis literally means cellular drinking. This is where the cell membrane invaginates and actually engulfs a fair amount of fluid and particles that may be dissolved in that fluid. So it's mostly bringing in fluid. That's why it's called cellular drinking, and whatever might be dissolved in that fluid when it brings it in. This is called pinocytosis. The second type of endocytosis is referred to as phagocytosis, or cellular eating. This is where larger particles are brought into the cell by the same process where the cell membrane invaginates, pinches off, and forms a vacuole. There are cells in our body that are referred to as phagocytes, such as our white blood cells. And this is how they engulf bacteria, for instance. They bring the bacteria into the cell, and then a lysosome will come and attach to this particle, this bacteria, and the lysosome has digestive enzymes and it will destroy the bacteria. All right, phagocytosis or cellular eating. If substances are moved out of the cell, we refer to that as exocytosis. Exo literally means out. And the example that I want to show you is where cells actually secrete substances. If you remember from our study of organelles, we know that ribosomes make proteins, and the proteins are dropped off in the endoplasmic reticulum. The endoplasmic reticulum will then form little vesicles that will float to the Golgi apparatus, where the proteins are modified, packaged up for transport either within or outside of the cell. If these proteins are being exported outside the cell, this is referred to as secretion, and these vesicles will attach to the cell membrane and be dumped into the extracellular fluid. And that is referred to as exocytosis. All right, so that's active transport. Keep in mind that active transport requires energy on the part of the cell, and it can move molecules against the concentration gradient. All right, I hope that helps. Please feel free to send me your questions on my big campus or bring them to class. All right, hope you have a great day.